Hi, thanks for joining us for Eileen Chevalier's Typewriter Alphabet Botany flashcards. So today we are going to look at common names. Each plant species has one scientific name, but can have many common names, especially if the plant grows in many different places or is used for many different purposes. In this lesson, we will discuss the common names and compare them with scientific names. For this lesson, under your read section in your lesson guide, you will see that we're going to look at Karl, Get Out of the Garden. And as always, you'll want to have your typewriter alphabet flashcards. The ones that we're going to use specifically today, if you want to go ahead and get them out, as you can see, we're going to use the B card. B is the card for common names. And we're also going to look at H, S, and U. All right, so as always, we are going to start with some definitions. So get out your journal and you can write down the definition for common name. A common name is the informal name that is widely used, often describing the physical or medicinal properties of the plant. So last time we learned about scientific classification, which uses genus, species. The common name is just anything that people use, and it couldn't be very specific. Like there can be a common name in one area or one country that isn't the common name in a different country. So it's not necessarily common to everyone, but within a particular group, it is a common name, and it's not a scientific name, although sometimes they cross over. All right. So we have 4 question and investigate topics today. The first is look at common names for the plants used in medicine on page 10 of Karl, Get Out of the Garden. What do you think these plants might have been used for? How might these common names be more useful than the scientific names? Okay, so here's page 10 of Karl, Get Out of the Garden. Karl's parents couldn't afford to give him much money for his studies. He was always hungry, happy to get even one meal a day. He had to patch his worn-out shoes with tree bark or go barefoot. But he studied hard and soon began using his beloved plants to cure people's ailments. There was just one problem. Which plant was which? So on this page, there are a bunch of different plants shown. There's feverfew, birthwort, woundwort, wormwood, heel-all, boneset, and a rheumatism weed. So as you can tell from those names, those are the names of medicinal plants. And so there are clues within those common names for medicinal plants about what they're actually going to do. So for example, feverfew, what do you think that you would probably be given that plant for? I'm guessing fevers, right? The problem with especially herbs that are used for healing is that if you don't identify them correctly, it can be really dangerous. So there are lots of plants that look similar. So being really specific about what the genus and species is incredibly important. If the scientific name, like let's say Karl named it after a person, would that be as helpful as, for example, the word feverfew? So sometimes the common name might be more helpful and sometimes the scientific name might be more helpful. So it really varies, and you can look at that like as you go along. Just start paying attention to what things are named and who named them and how that name is useful or potentially inaccurate. This is the second question. What were the common names for dandelion? Why do you think it had so many? So we did a little bit in the scientific classification lesson, but I'll read some of them out to you. So these are mainly listed. This is what all of the different people on page 13 are saying. Dandelion, swine's snout, yellow daisy, and blowball. It's also Irish daisy. And there were lots and lots of names for daisies, or for dandelion. Some of them include daisy. So why would it have so many different names. If you look at the word dandelion, it's actually like French. So the dente is the tooth. So it's like a lion's tooth. So that had to do with how it looks. And then there are a bunch, none of them are listed here, that have to do with the physical effects. Like once you eat or consume the dandelion, like what it does in your body. Blow ball, obviously. You've probably, hopefully, because it's super fun, found the dandelion and blown off all the little seeds. So that has to do with just how you would play with the plant. So dandelions are a really fun one because there's so many different names from so many different characteristics of the plant itself. Third question. Compare the common names with the binomial nomenclature names on the cards. What do you notice? What's similar or different? Does the letter on the card match the common name or the scientific name? So this is something you can do with all the cards. So if you'll remember, on the back of your card, there are two names down at the bottom. There's a dark one, and that is the common name. So here we have bleeding heart. And then there's the scientific name. So Dicentra formosa is the scientific name for this plant. As you can see with this one, they're really different. And then we'll look at, I'll put these in upside down order. So next is Ulster Mary. So this is actually not what we call this plant in America, but yew was a really difficult word for me to find a flower for. So in England, they call Alstroemeria Ulster Mary. So that's what we're using. The genus species name is Alstroemeria angustiflora. So Alstroemeria is the genus of this flower. And if you hear them, Alstroemeria, Ulster Mary, they sound really similar, right? And Ulster is actually a place in England. So there's its name, right? Like if you hear the name Ulster and you know that that's a place, and then you hear Alstra, it's kind of similar. So I don't think it had anything to do with that. It's also called Peruvian lily, so it's not really even from there. So the common name is kind of just like a play on the scientific name, although that's not the only common name. This one is really great. So sunflower is what we call all the sunflowers. This one, there are a bunch of different species of sunflower. This one is Helianthus annuus. So if you think about the word Helianthus, Heli is actually like Helios, which is the god of the sun. So it definitely relates to sunflower. And then annuus, it just means year or annual. So if you've ever grown sunflowers, you know they have to grow them every year. They don't come back on their own. Although I have had sunflowers come back just from the seeds in the compost pile, which is really great. But they do have to come up from the seed every year, so they're an annual plant. And then, this is one of my favorites. So I always knew this is a hellebore. And then one of my friends came over when my hellebore were blooming, and he said, "Oh, you have so many Lenten rose." And I was like, "Lenten rose? What are you talking about?" But that is indeed the common name, is Lenten rose, and the Lent is a time of year in the Christian calendar, so it's the period before Easter, and that's actually when these flowers bloom. They're one of the few like winter blooming plants, and they bloom on my birthday, so I love that. But it's the Lenten rose based on the time of year, and it has the same like 5-petal shape as a rose. So Helleborus lividus is the scientific name, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the common name. So you can do that for all of yours. It's really interesting to see how they relate, and then like some common names relate, and then some common names actually don't relate at all to the scientific name. Next question is compare Dicentra formosa on the B card with Dicentra spectabilis in the dissection video. Dicentra spectabilis is now a new genus. It's Lamprocopnis spectabilis. Why would the genus change? And what are the effects of classification change? So this is going to continue to happen. The scientific classification will change over time because we will learn more about everything. Just like we learned about DNA, and then we were able to classify things based on the DNA. As we learn more, we'll be able to change the classification system and make it more accurate. So why did that change happen though? I want to show you a picture. There is a video where I dissect a Lamprocoptos spectabilis, and they are amazing. I'll show you this big, amazing, gorgeous picture. This is from the DK Flora book, which I love. It has these amazing, huge pictures. So this is a fantastic one. And you can see, if you compare that one and you look at your B card, you can see that they are definitely different. So the Lamprocoptos is more of a real heart, and it just moves a little differently. Like the Dicentra definitely is a tighter form to the flower. I can't honestly tell you why the genus changed all the way. I'm sure you could do more research, but I do know that they are pretty different just from having dissected both kinds of them and the way that they grow. So it's hard to see that unless you see the whole plant. And I think I have in the video, you can see both plants. But the Lamprocoptos will have just one peduncle, which is what the stem basically of the flowers. So it's just a single one that all of the flowers are coming off of in single pieces. So here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one. And then if you look at the Dicentra formosa, it comes up and then you'll have several hanging down like this. You can see it. So every time you have a bleeding heart here, there's more than one. So they come in bunches. So that's another difference. And then the foliage of them is pretty similar, except that the Lamprocoptos is much wider and more open, and the spectabilis is more, looks like parsley kind of. So it's much tighter and more frilly than the Lamprocoptos. So I didn't do the research, but it did change. And in this one, let's see what they call it in here, because I've seen it in books as different, because it just depends on, yep, this is Lamprocoptos. And I believe that in the other book, it might be Dicentra, but it just depends on how old your book is, when that change happened, who was doing the editing. I mean, if you look at a book like this, there's so many genus and species that they have to keep up with. Like they might miss one even though it happened like 10 years before, just to get every single one of those. You may or may not know it. All right, time for journaling. So get out your journal. We have 3 activities for today. The first one is to find an interesting common name, draw the plant it represents, and why the name intrigues you. So go through your cards if you want, or you can get any plant you want, but you can just do it with your cards. Find one that you like, and why is that name fun? Like, I really love the sunflower, right? Because it relates to mythology. So that might be the one that you choose, and the reason that you like it is because it has that interesting name that relates to mythology. So, you know, I don't really know historically if it was called the sunflower, and then when they made the scientific classification name, they used Helianthus because they knew the mythology and it was already called sunflower. So it could have definitely, the scientific name could have come from the common name, which is pretty interesting. The second activity is to draw a plant, real or imaginary, and make up your own common name for it. So we did a similar thing in the scientific classification where you get to make up a name. So again, Karl, Linnaeus, and now anyone who's a scientist, when they find new plants or new species, they have to come up with a new name, right? So they too are just making that up. You can base it on, if you know Latin or Greek, that'd be really cool. You could find things, or even from mythology, like you could pull names from there. Or you can just make it up based on people or where you found the plant or where the plant would grow. The third activity is Alstroemeria angustiflora has several common names. So we looked at that one before. I'm just going to show you the picture again. So there's Ulster Mary, Peruvian lily, lily of the Incas, parrot lily, or Ulster Mary. Why do you think Alstroemeria has these names? Make notes to yourself and drawings, if possible, about where these names come from. So for this one, you might actually get out a map and find Peru and find where the Inca lived and think about where parrots live and find the origins, where the Peruvian lily is native to, and think about how all of those things are related. So that's more of a little bit of research, but then you could even like draw a map or get a picture of a map and put it in your journal and show why the Alstroemeria might be called Peruvian lily or any of those other names. All right. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoy doing those activities and learning more about the common names of plants. Keep an eye out for those as you go along all year, and I will see you on the next lesson. Bye.